We could start by, if you just explain a little bit about your role at your organization.
All right. I'm the business procurement manager for Valspar General Industrial Business. And what that means is I'm responsible for supply chain elements within the business consisting of site purchasing, inbound freight, and also supply chain cost reduction and working in conjunction with the lab to achieve formulated cost reduction.
Within this role at your organization, would you say that supply chain risk is increasing? And if so, can you share your experience on the top factors that influence your supply chain strategies?
Yeah, I would say right now it is, and I define risk as anything that prevents a company from getting a product to a customer. So this, it could be material related, delivery related, quality, anything of that nature. What we're seeing right now with our supply base is people are simply either making less, closing facilities, or constricting supply to maintain pricing, basically because of the fact that demand is tanking. So this means you've got fewer secondary sites. You've got less inventory in the pipeline in case of an issue or a new product where you've got growth, and therefore you've got increased risk. At the same time, you've got people cutting corners with product quality. We've had cases where we're seeing lots of variation within raw materials. And then I guess the third factor with freight is no one in the freight business right now is making money. So our carriers are either disinterested in our business because they're not making anything, or going out of business, which means there are fewer people to service our needs. And that therefore makes it harder to get product to the customer.
Okay, so what was the first, you mentioned three big risks. There's the product quality, there's the freight losses. What was the first one?
Capacity. Lack of capacity in the marketplace. And I guess I'd add a fourth factor in here too, is that the supply chain is becoming increasingly global, and you've got inconsistent standards around the world and inconsistent expectations. People in, I don't want to pick on Brazilians, but Brazilians are less adept or less willing to, it's a cultural thing where they're more passive, and rather than Americans, which are much more aggressive. So when there's a need for something, they may not be on it as quickly as an American company. And when you've got limited options throughout the world, you typically want to have several options available for your company. And that may include international sources.
And is your company, or in your supply chain management, are you going to keeping pace with these risks, and are you taking any action on these risk factors?
Yes. We're basically, I would say the two things that we're doing here is, starting with freight, we're establishing corporate contracts with price escalator or de-escalator clauses tied to gasoline. Or diesel, I should say, actually. And what that does is that keeps everybody whole. It keeps us whole in the long run. Because, pricing, my assumption is, will go up and go down and go up and go down for the near future. With quality, that's the most difficult piece. We're increasingly sharing our expectations or standards with suppliers, targeting those companies that historically have been either more inconsistent or just naturally smaller. Dow Chemical is going to have a very, very high level of quality and a very, very high level of expertise in product manufacture. But, a little guy making a pigment in India may not have the same types of product specification controls. Related to that also is qualifying more people. So you've got more options available in the event that someone goes down. So, you used to work with a company that had 3 plants, they've closed 2. So you qualify someone else that now has 2 more plants, so you've still got more options in the event of a disaster.
Okay. And then how about the globalization?
Well, that's tied to that. That's why you have to globalize sometimes, is to spread your risk out among several options rather than simply using one domestic source. I guess I can give an example here of where people have run into problems is hurricanes. In the petrochemical industry, the large manufacturers are in the Gulf of Mexico, and let me think, we had Katrina, and then we had a couple other ones over the last few years that have severely impacted their ability to supply for 1+ months at a time. Having other options, international options may not be the fastest to respond, but it's better than nothing in the event of a catastrophe.
That's interesting, because at the same time I see people talking about how globalization hasn't fulfilled the promises that were expected, like going to China, for example, where people thought it would be lower cost, but actually it's a higher cost and sometimes more risk.
It's a lower unit cost, typically, but you're offsetting that with more risk. It's like playing the stock market. Do you want to invest in the little guy, small cap, or do you want to buy General Electric? Well, maybe that's General Electric these days, but you know what I mean. The high risk, high reward versus the low risk, maybe lower reward guy, and pick your poison. We've tried to strike a balance between the two.
Okay. Is there anything you'd like to see as far as in the industry for improving risk management, as far as information or things you'd like to learn?
Well, I don't know if it's an industry issue, because within the coatings industry, it's probably more within the petrochemical industry. And they're naturally tight-lipped, and I guess if I were those guys, I would be too. Really, it's openness to audit, openness to data sharing, and willingness to change. It's understanding your customer's needs, and in this case, we're the customer, and our need is to sleep better at night, if you will.
And do environmental concerns have an influence on your supply chain strategies?
Oh, yes. Environmental, I would tie in with government-regulated environmental, which would be specifically REACH in Europe. That's required us to design products that are, specifically able to meet the requirements laid out by the European Union, and also adjust our global product formulas. We typically try to service customers globally with one formula, which is we found to be their preference as well as ours. But that isn't always possible with REACH. I can think of one particular product where it was banned because it was believed to be a carcinogen in Europe, but in the U.S. they've shown no issues. I think the FDA looked into it and a few other agencies. And we were basically just told, nope, you got to change, and that's what it is. So it makes it more difficult. It makes you have a regional strategy rather than a global strategy in some cases.